You're gonna be beautiful, Jamie.
Marie, you are beautiful, and you're so part of this book. With so
This is-
much you taught me.
Oh man, I mean, I have no reason to believe that that's true, but I was rereading it again the past couple days, and it's like there's just like no missteps. It really is just enrapturing. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I can't. It's just joy. It is just joy.
I so appreciate you saying that. It's, sometimes we have to work a little hard to take it in, right? Because it's so used to pushing up my sleeves and working so hard that when it's time to stop and receive and say thank you, it feels a little vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Which is how I suggest people feel. And then when it's my turn, I get a little skittish.
Much easier to watch it than to do it. I know.
Yeah.
And this particular moment can be very overwhelming. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got a few people in here now, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the celebration of Jamie Figueroa's debut novel, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer. Before we get started, I just want to let you all know of a few upcoming events we've got going at Green Apple. Tune in next Tuesday to see Rebecca Handler in conversation with Caroline Paul for Rebecca's debut novel, Edie Richter is Not Alone. And next Wednesday, we'll have Sam Cohen discussing her story collection, Sarahland, with Andrea Lawler. And tonight we have Jamie Figueroa and Marie-Helene Bertino. Marie-Helene Bertino is the author of the novels Parakeet and 2 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas, and the story collection Safe as Houses. Her fourth book, the novel Beautyland, is forthcoming from Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. In spring 2020, she was the Distinguished Kittredge Visiting Writer in the MFA program at the University of Montana, and she thinks you can tell a lot about people from print interviews and also by knowing them. Jamie Figueroa is Boricua Afro-Taino by way of Ohio and a longtime resident of northern New Mexico. Her writing has appeared in Epoch, Yellow Medicine Review, and McSweeney's, among other publications. Jamie received her MFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts, where she is now an assistant professor. Enjoy the show, everyone.
Thank you so much, Erica and Green Apple Books. I think we're on. So I'm going to just continue as if I am convinced that we are on.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And this is my theater background coming to play. Welcome, everyone. You are most welcome here to celebrate this beautiful book, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer, by one of my beloved and dear friends, Jamie Figueroa. Twice in my teaching career, I have been introduced to a student in a way that was utterly unforgettable. Many years ago, Jamie Figueroa approached me when she was interviewing mentors during her MFA program in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she said to me, "My name is Jamie Figueroa. I have a manuscript that is almost finished. I need this kind of notes, and I'm not interested in these other kind of notes. And that is what you're signing up for if you sign up with me. Essentially, are you in?" And I thought, when a strong, smart, empathic, generous, kind, intuitive woman tells me who she is, I believe her. I believe her, and I sign up for the ride. So it was utterly incredible to find years later. I was driving up to Vermont and I received a phone call from another friend of mine, an editor named Jonathan Lee, who works at Catapult and who I know to have a very keen eye. He had just read a novel by a new author, Jamie Figueroa. The novel was Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer. And he wanted to know what he was missing. He said, "Marie, why has no one snapped her up yet?" And I said, "Jonathan, because people are idiots. You must sign her up. You must." Well, Brother, Sister, Mother Explorer's heart is shaped like a brother and sister named Rafa and Rafina. Rafa and Rafina have made a bet. If they can raise a certain amount of money in one weekend street performing, Rafa will stay on the earth. But they are not alone. Protecting them and overseeing this bet are the grandmothers to all, a baby who never ages, a heartbreakingly devoted police officer named Lucio, one of my favorite characters of all time, the angel, and the land of enchantment itself, Santa Fe. All of these gorgeous characters, these creations, bear witness as over the course of one weekend, a sister races to save her brother's life. But angels can only do so much. I am so thrilled that it is the reason that tonight we get to gather to celebrate this phenomenal book, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer, and this phenomenal woman who knows exactly who she is. Jamie, thank you for the honor of joining you tonight. I'd like to invite you to join us and to read from this beautiful novel.
Marie, thank you so much for all of that. I would have laughed much louder if we weren't online right now. That's hilarious. I was remembering just how driven I have been for quite some time, and have been called earnest on more than one occasion, and that you appreciated it, and that you signed up. It was just you helped to make and shape this novel, and you helped to make this dream come true. And it's been a dream at work for decades, and sincerely since I could hold a pencil. So you are you've been written into my life, I'm sure, from before the start. And so it's an honor to be here with you. And I remember, Marie is such an outstanding teacher that you would say and bring so much insight and grace and wisdom about craft and about story. And I learned so much from you. And I remember Marie would say something that would make me sort of open like a flower to the sun. And that's when she would say, "This is so smart. Do you see how smart she was, or he was," if she was talking about another student. And we would just shine and bask in the acknowledgement and of Marie's support. And I saw that Tin House is doing this amazing conference and workshop this summer, and you're going to be teaching among with some really other fabulous people. So if you have not signed up for that, audience, writers, you must, to have the opportunity to be near Marie and all of her wisdom and grace and insight. Thank you, Green Apple Books, and thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. So how about if I read for a little bit? Does that sound good? Okay. I'm going to read a few pages from the beginning of the book. So the book is structured into 3 parts: Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It takes place over this weekend. And then I'll read a little bit from Saturday, just a couple pages when the mother and the children were younger. And then I want to read a little bit later on Saturday when there's a flashback, or whole scenes to the past, about the explorer and sort of how he involves himself in their lives. So let's get started. "Oh, holy, holy, holy," sings the sister, Rafina. "My baby, return." She can skin a refrain until it's raw, a glistening pulp of yearning. which is to say she won't be the one who loses. Anyone can sing a song, hum a melody, claim a costume, but the way she tilts toward the crowd with the whole of her body like a ready-made promise, now, that should get your attention. It's undeniable. She means it. Don't take your eyes off her. It's the end of May and 4:10 on a Friday afternoon. This high desert mountain city has already begun to swell. At the height of the season, Ciudad de Tres Hermanas will double in size and then some. Tourists pant dry air through open mouths at 7,000 feet, waiting to be fooled. It's dizzying. They have earned this right, saved up for it. Never mind them. This is not a story about them after all. This is a story about Rafina and her brother Rafa, who are performing little creatures they call songs, which are not songs at all. Not songs, but eruptions of noise, prayers, fortunes. Let's not call it ridiculous, which it can be if you're not in the mood. The plaza is a patchwork of grass anointed with cottonwoods and box elders, pines and Russian olives. Trees are a blessing here in this place where water shamelessly flirts. Decorating the cottonwoods, crows, hungry and black as regret. Beyond the trees and the city limits, beyond all the one-story buildings made of mud and dirt and spit, 4 mountain ranges huddle, one in each direction, as if conspiring. Do you see them? Don't you agree? Their backs toward you, peaks crowned with snow as if royalty. And the sky, the only enduring commitment, so vast and blue, it's no longer blue, no longer sky. The crows bark, a murder of them locked on the umbrella of branches above. It's as if Rafina is 10, not 28, and Rafa is 12, not weeks shy of 30. This is what the recent death of a mother will do. Strip adulthood from grown children. Send them to the streets begging for a reason to live. You'll see, it's Rafina's fault. Blame her if it doesn't work. She's the one who, the previous night, crawled under their deceased mother's bed where Rafa was pretending to hide, as if his filthy feet jutting out from beneath the frame haven't given him away, and told him, look, if you want to die too, you're going to have to earn it. Life isn't easy, and neither is death. Her voice was a constant hiss of air. You're not going to hang around here dissolving like you're some kind of. Rafina paused, searching for the right word, the right image that would sufficiently support her scolding. All possibilities escaped her. It had been 4 months since they covered their mother, Rosalinda, the small, dark, worn scrap of her in a blanket of mums, and carried her away to be burned. It had been dusk, and the snow had glinted in mid-air while coyotes split the quiet with their crying. Rafa and Rafina had studied her as her waning hours had passed, as if she were a map they would never truly understand. Rafina inched closer to her brother's face, leaned toward the fleshy nub of his nose as if it were a microphone. It's disgusting, she said. Get to living or get a weapon. Enough is enough. She hoped her threat would work, hoped she could still manipulate her brother with a healthy dose of shame. Tricky, she knew, but worth a try. The day after Rosalinda's death, Rafa and Rafina had both lain on the cold tile floor of the living room, neither of them able to will themselves to stand, put match to kindling, and tend a fire that would thaw them. Instead, they remained numb. Grief waited at the edges, sniffing the boundaries of their bodies, waiting to be let in. The house had no choice but to watch. On the second day after Rosalinda's death, Rufina got up and started the fire. Rafa remained lost for the third day and the fourth day, the fifth and the sixth, staring into space, drifting in and out of sleep. He seemed to prefer the floor as had his mother. It was where she had stitched embroidery and painted her ink portraits, where she ate and where she sat long hours, staring out the window that stretched from the ceiling to floor of the south-facing wall, while a record tumbled sound and one cigarette after another clung to her bottom lip. With each week, then each month, Rafa had lost more weight, paled further, spoke less. Each new day had demanded he persist. He lit one of Rosalinda's cigarette butts, stained with her fuchsia lipstick, and let the smoke fill his nose, laced with the scent of her headache-inducing perfume. He could not get enough of his mother, the woman who was no more. So I'm going to jump forward to the next day, Saturday. This is the day that later in this chapter, the family, Rafa, Rufina, Rosalinda, meet the explorer for the first time. I'm not going to read that far, but I do want to just give you a glimpse of their earlier life, just prior to when the explorer entered. So this is on Saturday, chapter 8. It was the third Saturday of June, the first day of summer. Rafa was 9, Rufina 7. They paraded with the mother into the small city like they did most Saturdays. Rufina, the tallest with the longest gait. Notice how both hips were stable, equal. Both were once beautiful and strong. Rafa held the mother sewing to the center of her chest. To the center of his chest. Rufina cradled the mother's ink drawings, mounted on squares of wood and individually wrapped in cloth napkins, stacked in a box that was cumbersome to carry, not because of its weight, as it was fairly light, but because it was twice as long as it was wide. She managed by setting it down to switch her grip every few yards. While she did this, she waited for the other two. Then she would start off again. The mother, holding her elbows, was the last to rejoin. As they crossed the plaza, the mother's skirt billowed, a kite too close to the earth. A grass-woven hat shielded her eyes. The cloak of her hair fell past her waist in a thick black expanse. Modern women scurried around her with their curled, lacquered hair, nails filed and polished into points, tight denim cutting into hip creases, while they balanced on the tips of their high heels. Simple gold crosses strung around their necks. They avoided the mother, refused to make eye contact. She noted their shadows moving across the ground. Rosalinda had lived here for nearly 10 years, and still, every time she entered the plaza, she would stop and take it all in as if it were the day she arrived. She did so on this day as well. The cottonwood trees were so massive and commanding, it was as if they were pinning the plaza to the earth. Crows flicked and twirled through the air on their jaunts above. Day laborers passed through, hurrying to clock in. The original enduring ones tended to their wares and watched, amused. Tourists, coerced by turquoise, painted boots and cowboy hats, hauled bags, bought more and more, argued about price. The adobe storefront walls facing the plaza created edges not unlike a box. Inside the plaza, families sprawled out on the grass, lapping at ice cream cones. In the center, a fountain with multiple tiers of concrete bowls brimming with water, coins lining the bottom. The mother slipped off her shoes, stepped onto a bench, toes gripping wooden slats, palms balancing on each child's head, and surrendered her eyes to the sight of the mountains, both near and far. She inhaled deeply, pulling all that she could see down deep inside her body, the strength of the mountains, the strength of the sky. It was not where she was from, this was true, but it was her home. She had claimed it, and we could say it claimed her as well. She was alive. Her children were alive. She had a son in whose face she saw her father's and her grandfather's faces, her brothers' and uncles' faces, men who had done their best to protect her. There were the gifts of the house, the garden, the rain every afternoon during monsoons that blessed her whether she believed she deserved it or not. Her memory had grown over with scar tissue, which meant the function of her mind kept to the pathways that were most useful, most relevant. And her body, the small, sturdy package of it, was a paradox of fierce survival and fragility. But in this place, Ciudad de Tres Hermanas, she could pretend she understood what it meant to be safe. Marie, do you think I should stop there?
Girl, you stop if you want to stop. You keep going. I could listen to you for another year. If you feel like you want to pause and chat, we'll do that.
Let's pause and chat for a little while, and then if it feels like a space opens later, I might read a couple more pages, but yeah.
Yeah, I need to breathe after that. Oh my gosh. Jamie, I'm so glad you read those particular passages. The mother walking through the plaza is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that. Gosh, I thought of like 5 more things I want to ask you while you were reading, but thank you for that really beautiful reading. I thought I would ask, because I know a novel is one of the hardest things a human can do. My students tell me this a lot, and I have personal experience with that being true. So I thought I would ask, and you know, I know a little about the journey for you writing this novel and getting it published. There are always dark nights of the soul where it feels like it's just you and your story that only you can tell. Would you share a little of, you know, what moved you through to the next moment when you had those nights of the soul?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it reminds me also of, you know, that quote by E.L. Doctorow about, right?
Yes.
Do you want to say it? Do you want to say
it? I just pulled it up. You do it. You do it. I can't believe you just said it.
I'm going to paraphrase here. So if you want to say it word for word, then maybe you had better say it word for word.
I do have it. Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, why don't you say it word for word? Because I would end up paraphrasing.
Wow, okay. Writing is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make it the whole trip that way.
Yeah. You know, I had also imagined it being at night in the fog, right? So it's like, how many years can you drive at night through the fog, seeing only as far as your headlights?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, what would happen is I would actually have to get really quiet and still when I would write, right? Because I would sort of want it to be over with so I could finish the torture of being in process, because being in process is one of the most torturous things, especially for someone who likes a little bit of control now and then, because you can forget it, right? And so I would become impatient at times with the story or with my writing, or I would just want to know more than I knew at the time. Mm-hmm. And that would make for really bad writing days. For most of the time that I was writing this, I did have quite a bit of time, because I tethered myself to the writing of this happening and said no to lots and lots of other things, like regular employment, which meant that I was house sitting, pet sitting, sleeping on people's couches, all of that. So I tried to list as many people as I could in the acknowledgement. So thank you all for that. But what was really difficult was that pushing, that desire that I would have for control over a story that had to have its way with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have to get really quiet. And it almost like, I'm sure you have your own experience of this, and I would love to hear what your experience of this is. But it's almost like finding your balance with your eyes closed,
Mm-hmm.
or listening for something that you hear or think you hear that's very far off.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sort of straining with all of your capacity to pay attention, both with your internal ear and your external ear, right? And your external eyes and your internal eyes, to really sense and receive and ultimately be led
Mm-hmm.
by the force of the story and by what the characters need to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's most of it. And then there's what happens towards the end when you revise more times than you think is humanly possible, and you have lost count, right? And I remember many things that you've said, Marie, that have helped me. I think you said something to the effect of, and I'm a master at paraphrasing and terrible at verbatim, so forgive me, but once you were talking about writers having difficulty and or struggling, and you're like, oh, that's a Wednesday.
My God, yeah. Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that sort of brings things down to size. Clearly that I'm not the only one who's ever done this, excuse me. And that there's a deep commitment, right? And a deep sense of perseverance that is absolutely necessary. And then, you know, you get to, like I said, the stages of revising. And another thing that you said was to get out your tiny wrench. I'm going to quote Marie all night long and everything that she taught me. Get out your tiny wrench. And I've heard another writer speak in their revising process as turning over, picking up every single word as if it were a stone in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
and holding it and making the decision whether or not to put it back down on the page.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's for hundreds of pages. So that takes another, right, a skill for sure. But I think in those initial stages, I had this, with this novel, and then also in the past with some stories, by devoting myself to the creating of it,
Mm-hmm.
and the focus of it, and choosing to work on the novel again and again and again and again, and have that be my priority, it steered me out of situations in my life that did not serve me and did not serve my writing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there was something about the act of creativity, the act of writing, and the force of this book in particular that was sort of overseeing me. You know, as I showed up for it, it also was helping inform what I was doing with my life, the choices I was making.
Mm-hmm.
And there could have been some really bad, you know, years of effect from some of those choices that were righted very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to work on this novel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You showed up for it, and it sounds like it showed up for you. And I do find that the more you do it, the more that tends to happen. It's so interesting that you're describing it as almost protecting you and acting as divining rod, because one of the things I love in this book is how it is about how we take care of one another. Whereas so many books, I feel like most books are about how we fail to take care of one another. This book has endless examples of people protecting one another, both intimately and at a distance. It is as if the book itself is watching, and the reader is implicated in that, because at some point you have us as the only witness to what is happening to some of these characters as their hearts are being broken. And I wanted to ask you about the decision. There's a culpability of looking in this novel. The tourists are looking at the people who live there, the people who are performing for them. The angel is watching everything. They can watch, but they can't interact in certain ways. And, how did you calibrate all of the elements? How did you find the tone that served this collective looking and collective protection that just pervades this novel?
You know what I've been thinking about lately, Marie?
Tell me.
You know the truism, trust your reader. It meant two different things to me writing this. One was that there was certain ways that I knew a vast majority of readers, and I beg your pardon, I couldn't trust them to see what I needed them to see, right? On behalf of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
We know this because of the political climate that we live in and the racial injustice that happens constantly on every level, including the systematic injustice. So trust your reader, right? I did have to trust my reader that they could take what the narrator had to dish out.
Mm-hmm.
Because and this reminds me of something I heard Russell Banks say once, that, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, and perhaps have heard other writers talk about this. When you sit in your chair to write, it makes me a little bit weepy. That is your best, highest self engaging in that act, as if your writing desk is an altar, right? So the narrator of the rocks, of the roots, always conscious of all elements of beingness that have ever been in that place, had something to say.
Mm-hmm.
And at times I think it stings, and at other times I think it's the kind of truth that we feel so relieved when we hear it, right? But there were times I had to navigate that narrator, and I think it's truly the narrator woven through, the narrators plural, having them woven through, that really kind of cinches what might fall apart with all of those various perspectives. And there's also, in the act of making art and the act of sharing story, having to exist in the in-between spaces, having to exist in the gray matter, not in binaries of black or white, right? Because that's where humanity is. And so there was a lot of trusting of the narrator, and then there was doing too much and having to pull back. And so that trust your reader meant different things at different times. That makes sense.
It absolutely does. And the best way to trust your reader is being honest with them, being as honest as you can, trusting that they can stand the truth. And I think you do that so well. You trusted them, but you guided them. That narrator definitely is not opinionless. Look here, don't miss this. Don't let her walk by. Don't let her go. It's just the exact right moments we feel the need for and receive direction. Mm-hmm. It's so lovely. I just want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions in a few moments. So if you have any, please pop them into the chat or the Q&A function, and I will be happy to relate them to Jamie. But Jamie, you were about to say?
I was just about to say that, I don't know, I forget now. I started to lean forward and to think about questions in the chat. I have a question.
Were you about to say, this is so nice being here together?
This is so nice being here together.
So nice. This is nice.
You know, also, I have to just say very briefly, I remember, you know, before I met Marie, I read Marie's books. So that same student who was like, here's my list of things I require from you. I had read and studied Safe as Houses and 5 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas. And the thing that I noticed about both of those books, but especially about 5 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas, which was so just sort of took my breath away, was the how the story worked at the sentence level.
That's what I'm just about to ask you about. That's what I just wanted to talk to you about. Speaking of picking up rocks and putting them down, on page 1, just to read a tiny thing, one of the many sentences that are just perfect on page 124. A man can love a woman and never touch her. A man can be more devoted to a woman who will never be his wife and save her in ways she will never know. Like this, every time Lucio Armijo thinks of her, he sees her in all her light and guards that light in his own mind. Even this can make Rufina safe, help her remember herself, ease the force of her shadow. There was not one moment where I guessed and was correct about where a sentence was going to go. And that's about the highest compliment I can say about line level. I was just, my students this week, we were talking about good books and our favorite books and what the difference is between them. And they were all saying, if it's not going on the line level, it can't be a favorite. And I was very proud of them for saying that.
Taught them well.
How did you, but you must have heard some of these lines. Like, how did you make sure? I know the tiny wrench, but like, how did you make sure that you liked that these were your favorites, that you were matching your insight level? How did you do it? How did you do this?
You know, I think it's reading a lot out loud.
Uh-huh.
There's something about that, you know, there's a rhythm. I think this comes from my early training as a poet. Didn't you have an early training as a poet?
Yes, oh my God, that's the same thing.
Totally, we can totally relate to each other about that.
Yes.
In fact, I have to, sometimes when I read aloud and I mark a paragraph, I put in line breaks in the prose.
Oh wow, that's gorgeous. I don't go that far, but that is. Oh, so you're, because you come from the poetry background.
I come from a tiny young age, writing poetry and loving poetry and reading poetry.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of my life, and then at one point I needed to choose, you know, more of a focus, and I felt like, you know, fiction is the place where it can all exist.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind the fact that you get into these really delicious in between spaces of genre definitions, which are my favorite to hang out in.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have incredibly poetic prose. You can infuse your fiction with autobiography, and still have a respectful, safe distance in places that you must have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was listening for rhythm, sound. You know, that sensation when you read a poem or you read prose that is, it's almost like just like having the perfect flavor in your mouth, whether it's like the combination of flavors, and it feels like the inside of your mouth is singing because you have read, you know, a verse of poetry or sentences of prose that awaken. and they awaken in the breath, and they awaken on the tongue, and they awaken through all of the senses, actually. And it's so life affirming.
Yeah. Who is the poet who does it for you? Is there a poet you've been returning to recently during the pandemic or every so often?
You know who I kind of fell in love with recently? Do you know the Belarusian poet Belgania Mort, who has a collection of poems called Music for the oh, I'm so sorry, I'm getting this title wrong.
No,
Music for the Dead and Resurrected.
Oh, lovely. Contemporary poet?
Yeah. Yeah, I heard an interview with her in fairly recently, in the past few months, on NPR. It was a fairly short interview, and I listened to it over and over and over again. She talks about emotional history, and she talks about archiving silence, and she talks about, you know, trauma. What do you do with language in the face of trauma, right? Really gorgeous. Yeah.
As in, how do you reconcile the fact that it's arbitrary, or how do you use it to render trauma?
Yeah. Well, I think both. You know, we know that it impacts our language, it impacts our creativity and our imagination, right? When trauma has its you know, when it's present, and sometimes it's ever present, right? When we hit certain memories, and still, how do we find the language that we need to meet it, right? How do we soothe ourselves enough in a moment that we can also become so raw, to navigate what's on the page? You know, I was thinking about also reality, you know, realism, magical realism, all the ways that we talk about anything that's not considered realism, right? And I was thinking about emotional reality and how we physicalize emotional reality in place with characters. You know, and for me that means that I need a lot of space, right? I need everything at my disposal to tell a story that impacts generations, genetic material. Do you know what I mean? You know exactly what I mean.
I think I do. I would like to believe that I do. Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because I was just listening. I've been listening to this podcast, the On Being podcast,
Yes.
Krista Tippett. And I was just listening to it before I signed on here. And she was interviewing a poet who said, you know, I've never heard anyone say that they felt worse after writing something down. Through writing something down and using words to articulate our experience, we work through these traumatic moments and these traumas. I just,
that poet Jericho Brown.
Yeah.
Yes, that is such a good episode.
Oh, Jericho Brown. Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal. He's a phenomenal human being, and his poetry is fantastic. And that episode, everyone needs to listen to it. I made my students listen to it. I was like, this has to do with everything that's important. And then we'll talk about it later, and that's class. Yeah, exactly.
I want to remind everyone that you can still put questions in the Q&A for Jamie. And I've been remiss because I haven't yet mentioned your unbelievable rave in the New York Times. Santiago. I have to, Jamie, I have to bring this up. It was to get to get a rave in the New York Times at any point is so unbelievably stellar. To get one like right before or on the day of,
Yeah, on the day of
coming out, absolutely, just somebody is looking out for you, as we would say by family. Somebody's looking out for you. Someone's looking for you. And speaking of like articulating trauma, one of the moments that really hit me this past time that I read Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer is when we find out kind of what has happened to Rufina, what the relationship between Rufina and the Explorer has been. And in that moment, you have her guides almost like rise up to bear witness to it. I found it to be such a generous choice. It reminded me of listening to Hanya Yanagihara be interviewed about writing A Little Life, which also was filled with her book was filled with a lot of trauma. And she said sometimes the only witness to that trauma was the reader. I thought that was so savvy and clever and wise, as much as I found it to be the same with your decision to have these forces rise up and watch. They couldn't stop it, but they could be there. These women could be there for her as it was happening. And it's just stunning. I've never read it before. I've never read anything like that before. I've read tons of violence against women in books, and I've seen it a lot in movies, but I've never, I don't remember ever encountering such a generous act by the text. Did you have a sense of doing that, or was it instinctual?
I think it was a little bit of both. And it was also a deep understanding that our ancestors are survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Much of what my ancestors endured, I do not know the specifics, and I will never know the specifics. I have heard stories. I know some things. There's a lot of horrific material. And I imagined, similar to epigenetics, similar to that our ancestors are present with us, in us, is sort of the presence of ancestral trauma, generational trauma, our own trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And also is the presence of their survival, their joy, their ability to soothe and heal and remember what's beautiful and remember a sense of wholeness, right? And so in the moment of Rufina's greatest terror, I also wanted this sense for her that she was not alone, that within her, as you're saying, bearing witness, are her ancestors, especially the women in her family line, who are singing through her cells a song of survival for her that will help her endure that moment and to continue to survive.
That's just so beautiful. That is just so beautiful. And that is a radical act.
Yeah.
It is actually a radical, that is a true radical act. And that is a way that I think you can write so that what you're writing about does what it's talking about in form and content. It's just stunning.
I really appreciate you saying that. I also have to say, thank you to the New York Times. That was such an incredible shock. And at first, someone texted to me and I saw it and I was like, what is this thing? I need to get my glasses. I don't understand what this is. And then it took a while for me to understand what had happened. And then it took a while for me to open it. And then it took me a while to realize who had written it. Esmeralda Santiago, an incredible Boricua, Puerto Rican writer who wrote When I Was Puerto Rican, which I read a number of years ago. That's on my shelf.
Yeah.
That she is of my mother's generation.
Yeah.
That she somehow all of this came together for her to read this, that she wrote what she wrote, that it, is in the times, that it came out on the day of publication. That's one of those sort of blessings that it's, you have to keep opening to receive it, because it's so rich. It's so, so incredibly rich. I'm so grateful.
She got you.
Yeah.
She had you. She had it. That is amazing. That's how you found out someone texted you? That's how?
Yeah, I was sort of, in the day, trying to make the day happen, and early a friend texted and said, I don't know if this is a big deal. She's not a writer. She's a lovely friend. She's like, I don't know if this is a big deal. It seems like have you seen this? Congratulations. Yeah.
Speaking of students, one of my students is here and has a question. This is wonderful. Okay, Travis would like to know, when sitting down to write, did you know the form from the outset, or did you discover it along the way? Was there a moment where you identified that this was going to be a novel and not a short story, a poem, or something else entirely?
That's a great question, which I'm going to take a little bit of time to answer. Ramona Acebal, also an incredible writer and mentor, said to her students, before you graduate, start your next work, because you don't know what life has in store for you. And you can continue to revisit this work that you have started while you still have the time, while you're still in this world of the MFA. So I'd finished the thesis, and then I thought, okay, I need to pay attention for that thing. Also, the year before, I had gone with Disquiet to Lisbon to spend some time in Portugal for like 3 weeks, I think, and had been listening to Pessoa, and had been also learning about other Portuguese writers, including the writer José Luís Peixoto, who wrote a book, and my Portuguese is terrible, which is why his name sounds much better than that. He wrote a novel called The Implacable Order of Things, which is a phenomenal, phenomenal book. And all of this talk about saudade, this longing that will never be met.
Mm-hmm.
All of that was sort of working around in there. And then I had almost a dreamlike memory, but it was not a dream. It was an imagined memory that kept sort of rising to the surface of my consciousness, which was the beginning of this book. It was the plaza, it was the brother and sister, and there was the language of these first 2 paragraphs that came with it, which was incredibly vivid and visceral, and it was actually more electric. I had to sort of take some of it out because it was incredibly overpowering. And I sat with it trying to figure out, what are you? Are you a short story? Are you a novella? Are you a novel? And I honestly just kept spending time with it and kept sort of asking, what next do you want to show me? Or what else do I need to know? And then I remember sending you, Marie, a very early draft, and it was kind of dream-like and opaque. And there were all of these handholds that were missing for the reader to make this a more concrete reality. And so a lot of the drafting later on had to do with sorting out the days and the actual structure that would help hold up something with this kind of language, and also with so many elements, strange elements at play.
Incredible. So it sounds like you had an inherent sense that there was more to be revealed in the story that was more the container necessarily had to be bigger. So you would have into novel form.
For sure. And I think just being curious about it, who are you two? What are you doing? Who is your mother? Why does she behave this way? What happened? And again, like we spoke about earlier, and sort of the, divining rod, and really listening and being willing to commune with the unseen realm, right? And to be in that unnameable space where things that are at work that inspire us are revealed to us, move through our creativity and our imagination, and surprise even us, and make even us read a work that we have written and cry, as if we didn't write it, right?
Yeah, sometimes, that's true, if we're lucky. To live inside that question mark, to live inside the ellipses, I think that's what you have to make friends with if you're going to make it through to the end of the novel. And it's like a different way of phrasing the driving in the fog at night, the small space that you actually do know, and using that as a flashlight or a divining rod to get to wherever the unknown place that you're going to. And I think as a teacher, because we're both teachers, the best you can do is like help them get to where they're going, to help shine the light. That's it. Because you can't possibly know where they're going either.
Absolutely. And I think it's, how can I say this in the most efficient way possible? Don't be afraid. This is what I would also say to this student and other students and my students, to cultivate a relationship with your writing. Feel like I have been, I don't just feel like I have been, I also actually have been cultivating a relationship with my writing for decades, which means great things may happen or they may not happen. And I will always have a relationship with my writing, and it's relating to me as much as I'm relating to it. And I think when you create that kind of spaciousness within yourself, there's a ripeness that can begin to happen, and it can be much more fulfilling, the whole process of writing, and also being with different projects, right? To also be on relational terms with them, and to realize that they're on relational terms with you, and it's going both ways. It's not just, right, from you outwards. Remember to be receptive.
1,000%. I think showing up for it every day puts you in that place where you can be receptive and you can stay curious. Cultivating that relationship is so important. That's so wise. I know we're almost at time.
It's true. Marie, this has been so much fun.
This has been lovely. It's always lovely to see your face and to hear you talk about writing and, gosh, all of it. And I'll be very professional and savvy and tell everyone that you will be appearing on March 10th with one Ms. Ramona Osabel for Book Club Magic in Brooklyn. I've memorized your entire schedule. I will, of course, be there. And yeah, I hate this question. And yet, ... What have you started your next project? Have you taken Ramona's advice and started your next project here?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I think it's equally as strange and demanding, and hopefully will be transcended. We'll see. We'll see once it has its way with me.
Are you driving in the fog?
I'm so in the fog at night.
Oh, I love it.
In my car driving.
Well, turn the radio on. Sometimes it's nice to listen to music while you're driving.
It's true. I need to listen to Jericho Brown while I navigate.
Over and over and over again.
It's true.
Yeah. And I don't think, okay, no, we've gotten to all the questions, and here is Erica. Hi, Erica.
Hi. Thank you both for that beautiful conversation. It was really inspiring.
Thank you.
Everyone, please head on over to Green Apple Books at Clement or 9th Avenue, or our website, greenapplebooks.com, to get your copies of both Marie and Jamie's books. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Be well, be safe. Good night.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.